Hello, welcome to the next edition of Sweet Competitive List that got 5-0 or got performed quite well in a different tournament. Today I got 5 lists that have recently put up results that are not necessarily quote unquote tier 1, tier 2. And to me, they look interesting enough for me to talk about them. So hopefully you guys like this. If you guys like this kind of series, make sure you smash that like button, leave a comment down below, subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year. So if you could help me with that, that would be very much appreciated. And let's get into the 5 list. So first we got a Orzhov like tokens deck. We have Wedding Announcement, Type Taker, which really doesn't see a lot of Pioneer play. So that is a very interesting to see. I kind of wonder why it's this over something like Thalia. I do get that it is not a legendary creature, so you could have multiple out. We have Virtue of Loyalty. I figured this was going to be one of the best virtues of the cycle, just because it's both halves, at least are competitive enough for standard or pioneer play. The black one I think also could see some copies if it's in the right deck, but Virtue of Loyalty I think has the highest chance of being a 4 of card. So, and it shows it here. So I'm quite happy with that. Of course, we have Fatal Push, Thoughtseize. They're just the best black cards in Pioneer. We have Wedding Announcement, which is one of the best white cards for grinding matchups. In the main, we also have Liliana the Veil, for it's pretty good against control and stuff like that, where depleting their counter spells is quite powerful. Bankbuster for the grinding matchups in the main as well. One and more in the side. So that's quite nice to see. Of course, we have Shieldred, Trespasser for graveyard hate a little bit in the main, and a Wandering Emperor as a kind of a mid-range piece. Let's get into the sideboard. So if we face something like Lotus Field, we most likely would be cutting the Fatal Pushes, bringing in Deafening Silence, and probably Go Blank. Seems like the best choices. Bankbuster probably isn't needed. But outside of that, none of these other cards really look great in that matchup. You could bring Fracture in maybe over Go for the Throat probably, just because you could get the Chandra, which is actually quite powerful. And then we have Fracture for artifact, enchantment, and planeswalker removal. Like I said, you might want to have this as your removal spells against Lotus Field. Also, I'm not really sure what other top tier deck you would want this. I mean, mono green, you do kind of want to get rid of Karn, but it's probably, is it better than something like Go for the Throat? That's questionable. So, rest in peace for the graveyard strategies. So again, something like Greasefang, Lotus Field, is it Phoenix? Two separate strategies here. So against like Greasefang, you don't really want to cut the push or the Thoughtseize. You actually probably want to cut something like Liliana the Veil. It's probably your better choice, and the Wandering Emperor, because they're quite slow, right? And their sorcery speed based removal. So you probably would trim them, bring in Rest in Peace, Go Blank. Seems like the better choices. So if you're making them discard, at least you're also exiling their graveyard as well with it as well. Kaya, probably you would not bring in for graveyard hate necessarily. Because if that was the purpose, it'd be kind of weird, right? Because you already have Rest in Peace and Go Blank for that. You don't need 2 more copies of graveyard hate. So that one's probably for something like Control or something like that, where you kind of want to have something to just eat up the memory deluges, as well as basically be a finisher. In that matchup, Fatal Push isn't very good, so you probably would cut Fatal Push, Go for the Throat, up Fracture, up Kaya. Seems like the best choice, and a Bankbuster. So that way you don't need the creature-based removal. Fracture gets rid of the most important pieces like the Fairy. And then you have Kaya as an alternative win con. So that could be a possibility. But outside of that, I'm not really sure what Kaya's for. Like, it's not great against mono green. Phoenix, maybe. That might be a decent option. But then again, you're kind of going overboard on graveyard hate. So I kind of wonder if it should just not be just a better, 3-mana planeswalker for the grindy matchups, stuff like that. But 2 extinctions events for them on a green matchup. In that matchup, you probably would end up just cutting Graveyard Trespasser. Trespasser doesn't seem very good in that matchup. Go for the Throat you want to keep, along with Edicts, just because you want to be able to get rid of the Elf turn 2. Duress is kind of mid, but it does get rid of a Karn, so that's kind of nice. Wandering Emperor can exile, which is quite powerful against mono green. So I think you would probably cut Trespasser for the events, since Trespasser does get outclassed quite fast against mono green. Outside of that, mono event is for the aggro matchups, but you probably would not cut Trespasser in that matchup. You probably would cut a slower card, like Liliana the Veil or Virtue of Loyalty in those aggro matchups. Potentially also Duress. So, also, we got Meathook Massacre also for the aggro matchups. Like I said, you probably would cut a couple Virtues and a Duress, potentially. Or maybe even Wedding Announcement. It really depends on how you want to attack that matchup. And the Wandering Emperor, probably also pretty decent against aggro as well. It gains you 2 life. It takes out a threat. It does not take out Adeline, so keep that in mind. But outside of that, that's kind of my estimated swaps here. Hopefully that helps you with a little bit of insight on how to sideboard with the deck. All these lists are in the description below. Let's get into the next deck. So next on my list is 4-Color Ascendancy. This deck is picking up Brave the Wilds. Also, it has Sleight of Hand, Up the Beanstalk, so it does play a decent amount of new cards. A lot of the cards at the 2-drop slot and the 1-drop slot replace themselves, which is actually quite powerful. It's what you really kind of want to be doing with Jeskai Ascendancy, since you want to be able to just keep turning through your deck. I do actively wonder how good Up the Beanstalk actually is, because it looks like it only draws off of Leyline Binding and Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. So that might be enough stuff to actually get an extra card draw off of. Outside of that, we have Chain to the Rocks. Is a pretty decent card against mono green. So clearly you must have enough mountains to actually make this work. We have Op, Consider, and Sleight of Hand, which are all really good cards, especially with Jeskai Ascendancy. And that's our main board. We have a lot of lands, and we're Yori on deck, so keep that in mind. So, right out of the gate, we have Running Volley. So, again, something like Spirits or aka Mono White, you most likely will be trimming down on Saheeli or something of the similar, approach, just because you don't really need a 3-drop slow card that doesn't actually, slow down your opponent. So that seems like a pretty good exchange. Also, Supreme Verdict would come in, probably also against aggro. So 3 Supreme Verdicts is actually quite powerful, and that's probably worth it more than Saheeli itself. So that matchup, you're most likely going to win by the natural turn your land into a creature and smash face. We have 2 Surge's Salvations for the Rakdos mid-range matchup. So we get to protect our hand, which is what we really need with Jeskai's Ascendancy. We can't have them discarding that. In that matchup, Portable Hole is probably pretty subpar. Probably could trim a couple copies of Portable Hole. Seems like the right choice, because everything else is actually pretty decent against mid-range. We have 3 Disdainful Strokes. Can help counter Shieldred. Can help counter mono green stuff. Against Rakdos, like I said, you might want to bring in those 5 cut 4 Portable Holes and maybe a Presence or something like that. A 2-drop draw spell probably is not the most optimal, especially since you have Up the Beanstalk, which is better. We have Pithing Needle. We also could bring against mono green. And against mono green, you probably would not cut Portable Hole because the getting rid of the elf is too important, right? So you probably would actually trim Saheeli along with maybe a Dig Through Time or something that's on the upper end of the deck. Supreme Verdict is kind of okay. I mean, it's pretty bad against Old Gold Troll and the Cavalier, but probably not worth, it's probably still okay enough to not cut. If he had Sunfall, it would be really powerful against mono green. And then we have Dovin's Veto against the control matchup, which is, I believe, Ascendancy's worst matchup, right? So against control, of course, you would be cutting the portable holes. Also against Lotus Field, you probably would be cutting the portable holes, upping Dovin's Veto. So Dovin's Veto is strictly for the combo matchups / control matchups. So keep that in mind. We have Pithing Needle, another copy. So we could definitely bring those in against mono green. I'm not exactly sure what you would cut other than Saheeli. In that matchup, Ren seems like it's too necessary for Jeskai to win. So, and then we have Supreme Verdict for aggro. We kind of covered this at the beginning when we talked about volley. Then we have a Yorion that we could just tutor at any point to help blink our presence, Beanstalk, stuff like that. And Leyline Binding and Chain of the Rocks, depending on what they exiled. So if you exile a token, right, you get to blink it, use something else. So that is 4-color Ascendancy for Pioneer. Let's get into the next. So next on my list is Mono Black Midrange. And of course, this deck picked up the Iron Crag, and it's trying to use the Iron Crag to get a earlier, I'm pretty sure, never mind. I do not see the Beseech. So Iron Crag, I guess, is here strictly to get an earlier Invoke Despair, earlier Virtue of Presence. So it's also playing Maze Mind Tome. I wonder why they actually prefer that over something like Reckoner Bankbuster, but that's something to be noted. The deck does play 3 Shielders, 1 big Shieldred, 3 Golos. We have a single Cascading Cataracts, Hive to be able to tutor with Golos, a single attack Enuma as well. We have 3 pushes, 3 Thoughtseizes, it looks like, which is an interesting combo. We have full play set of Thoughtseize. It's just hiding up here in the right here. Now, what really made me want to talk about this deck are these 3 lands right here. Cabal Stronghold. So it is quite powerful, I guess, with Field of Ruin. So maybe that is a reason to want to be able to actually play 8 Ruin and Mono Black. Cabal Stronghold is a nice payoff, I guess, for playing mainly swamps, right? Since Fields tutor for your swamps. That they're a utility land that doesn't really hurt you when it comes to Cabal, so that's quite nice. We have a one of Liliana of Dark Realms, which tutors for swamps. We have a Liliana of the Last Hope. It's a pretty sweet planeswalker. I think this is Phyrexian Arena right here. Then we have the End as a way to exile opponent's Shieldreds. So that's pretty powerful. And then we have Edict. Oh, there's the 4th push. This is kind of all over the place. Sorry about that. But we have 2 castles for utility lands. Like I said, Cascading Cataracts is for Golos. And then we have a Hive. We can tutor for Golos if we want a creature land. Sideboard wise, we have 2 Pithing Needles. So again, like something like mono green, you probably would be trimming a Shieldred, maybe, because you don't really need that top end threat. Also, Phyrexian Arena doesn't seem very good in that matchup. We have Go Blank as a way to fight through Greasefang. So that's pretty powerful. We also have, I guess, Extinction Event for the mono green matchup as well. So you probably bring in Pithing Needle and Event in that matchup. Maybe Grasp if you really want to. But like I said, the exile base is really what you want against green, not destroy target creature. It can, however, get Pelucranos, so that's quite powerful. Invoke Despair is already naturally good against mono green, since they really have a diverse set of permanent types. We have another duress for the combo matchups, where Fatal Push is pretty subpar. And we have Necromentia we could bring in for the Fatal Pushes against that matchup as well. We have Path of Peril and Extinction Event for aggro matchups. So in that matchup, you really want to probably cut Invoke Despair because it's slow. We also probably can cut a Phyrexian Arena. Also Liliana's potentially, just because it's a 4-drop. And against aggro, you really want to be very efficient. So that's pretty powerful. We have Thought Distortion down here for combo decks and control. We can bring that in, probably cut a Shieldred or something like that, because Shieldred doesn't really do anything against combo and control. So this is 1 extra mana, or maybe you would actually just cut the Virtue of Presence, since it's not good at all against control. Yeah, so that's pretty good. And then we have Necromancer. We can also bring in control and go blank / duress and tomb. So like I said, I do wonder why this deck isn't playing Bankbuster, but you know, if you have a reason why we're playing Tome over Bankbuster, let me know down in the comment section. Let's get into next. So next is the 5-0 list that Doomwake pulled off. I did watch some of these games when he played it live. So the deck is Greasefang Mardu, which this deck, unlike traditional Abzan mid-range Greasefang, this deck tries to use competitively good, strong mid-range pieces as the enablers. So that way, if plan B fails, right, we still have plan A, which is kind of just being a really good aggro deck. I mean, mid-range plan with Fable the Mirror Breaker, Blood Tithe Harvester. So we have those really good packages. We also have a single Shieldred, which is, you know, pretty decent. And 4 Nihiris as a way to loot, as well as reanimate a Greasefang for the turn. So that's really what you kind of want to be doing anyways, for a mid-range plan. Now, I will be dropping one later this week with Mardu Greasefang, except I'm playing the other Nihiri, which I think also could be pretty interesting. If you wanted to go down the Mardu Greasefang, we have 3 Sky Sovereigns and 4 Parhelions as our vehicles of choice for the Greasefang. I'm not sure about the Blood Chief's Thirst, right? So, I mean, they could play something like Cut Down. There's probably better removal. I wonder how important the Destroy Planeswalker text is. That would be the only reason why I think you would play this card over like something like Cut Down or something like that. Sorcery Speed is really bad, honestly. But and if you did the 4 mana value version of this, I would rather just play the end. So I don't know. Sideboard wise, we have Unlicensed Hearse. We could mix up our vehicle package for Unlicensed Hearse for the graveyard hate pieces. So we have a Duress for combo / control. Vanishing Verse, pretty good against mono green. Also pretty decent against Phoenix, because, I mean, you kind of want to get rid of the Phoenix. And also the Thing in the Ice. We have Rebel Master as an alternative way if we expect a lot of graveyard hate. We can cut probably the Greasefangs, bring in the Rebel Masters if we expect over a lot of graveyard hate. Since we are not have any kind of enchantment hate, we can't really expect to take out, I guess, some of the best. Actually, we should be fine, right? I guess Vanishing Verse gets Rest in Peace, gets Leyline of the Void. So maybe we do hit most of the best graveyard hate pieces with Vanishing Verse. You definitely would be bringing in Vanishing Verse, and if you expect graveyard hate, the enchantment side, right? If you expect artifacts that do graveyard hate, you'd probably be bringing in Kolaghan's Command instead. We have Necromancer that we could bring in against combo. So the Kolaghan's Command also pretty good against grinding matchups, where we expect they will kill our Greasefang quite often. And returning that to our hand is pretty good. We have a single Pithing Needle for Planeswalker hate. We have Omnixilus we could bring in against control. Stuff like that, where the uptick and trying to make them discard is actually quite relevant in that matchup. If you have any suggestions at all, let me know down in the comment section. Like I said, all these lists will be down in the description. Let's get into the last list on my radar today. So last on my list is a 4/5 color Bring to Light Omnath Elementals list. We only have, looks like, 2 Bring to Lights. So I guess, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I guess. We also have 2 Up the Beanstalks. Yeah, it seems kind of weird. I think you would be running a full playset if you wanted it, but sure. We have Binding as a way to force work quite well with Up the Beanstalk. Outside of that, we have Bring to Light to work with it as well, and Escape to the Wilds, and Elvish Norn at the very bottom down there. This is primarily a landfall type strategy, so we're trying to double up our Lotus Cobras with Elvish Norn, doubling up Omnath triggers with Elvish Norn, doubling up Nissa as well, and Risen Wraith potentially, and Omnath, the smaller one. So, like, all of those are pretty good with Elvish Norn. So, keep that in mind overall. We have 3 Voice of Resurgences. It's pretty good against something like Control, where it kind of makes them really not want to counter stuff on our turn. So, in non-control matchups, that probably would be one of the cards you want to cut first, maybe. So it's kind of a flex. I would assume that would be one of the flex slots in this deck. Of course, against something like aggro, you probably would be cutting Up the Beanstalk instead. You don't really need a 2-mana do-nothing enchantment, so you'd rather just have a removal like Running Volley in that case. Against something like Control, you'll probably be cutting something like Lotus Cobra and going up a Dovin's Veto, or maybe even the Glyph Weaver, go up Dovin's Veto. Against graveyard-based strategies, I would assume you'd be cutting up the Beanstalk for Rest in Peace. Again, like doing a 2-mana enchantment that does nothing, that affects the board against Greasefang when they combo off, probably turn 3. Doesn't seem very good. Rest in Peace is the better choice. Then we have Mystical Dispute we could bring in against Control. Again, I think maybe a Cobra and Chain to the Rocks probably is your best choices against those matchups. Against the Control matchup, we have Radiant Flames for the aggro matchups. That's our choice of Sweeper. We can bring in probably. I'm not sure what you would cut since a lot of our creatures will die to it, right? X3, like Risen Reef's dead, Voice is dead, Nis is dead, Cobra. So I don't know. Like you probably just want to trim down on your creatures a little bit for Radiant Flames. We have a Test of Talents, which I guess is pretty good against Lotus Field, along with Unborn Ego. But outside of those matchups, I don't really think they're necessary. We have additional Bring to Light in the side. I'm not sure what matchup you're bringing that in for. Because if usually that's a card you cut. And I can't imagine there being a world where not having that in the main isn't right. So I am curious to see how that actually pans out. It probably would make more sense, honestly, if Elvish Norn was in the sideboard and you bring in Elvish Norn in the matchups where you expect something like Leyland Binding, the Mirrors, stuff like that, where enchantment removal is dominant. But I can't imagine a world where there's a matchup where I'm cutting something to bring in a Bring to Light, unless it's, I guess, against aggro and you're like, okay, I'm going to cut a Escape to the Wilds for Bring to Light, because at least Bring to Light gets me my Glyph Weaver, which wraps the board. Maybe that's the argument, but still, I think by default, Bring to Light is better main than side, and Elvish Norn would be the better fit in the side. You know, you could do either way, however you see fit, if you want to bring this to a tournament or something like that. Then we have a Sky Sovereign, pretty good 5-drop that also could get rid of small creatures. There's a reason why Gruul mid-range has a good matchup against aggro decks, because of cards like Sky Sovereign that comes down, gets rid of a small threat, and take over the game from there. So, plus I think with Elvish Norn, it's like a double bolt for 5. So, anyway, that is the 5 decks we have to talk about today. What decks do you guys like the most? Let me know down in the chat. In the comment section below. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe. Like I said, we're on the way to 1,000 subs. Let's try to get there by the end of the year. So that's my goal right now. So if you could help me with that, I'd be very much appreciated. And until next time, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.